one of your textbook. So before we look at this, something I wanted to do was, so last time I told you what the purpose of the book, right? The purpose of the book is instead of learning the history of a person, right? Ki Shivaji, what did Shivaji do? What did Gandhi? Instead of learning histories of people or histories of events, we are learning the history of history, right? Ki how did history, right? And how has it reached where it is today? How did history start in the West, which is what we'll study today? How did history start in India? What is the value of history? That's chapter 3, right? Applied history. What is the value of history? We learn about history in different fields, right? So what is the history of Indian arts and how can we use it? What is the history of mass media and how can we use it for entertainment, sports, tourism? And then lastly, heritage management. Heritage management is ki theek hai, we've studied 8 chapters, we've understood that history is important. Therefore, how do we preserve history, right? How do we maintain history? How do we keep our history in good shape so that people can keep learning from it? So that's the last chapter, and this is the way your your syllabus is structured. So I just wanted you all to have that in mind, right? The aim is to learn the history of history and the use of history. Okay. And with that in mind, we're going to study today how history started in the West, right? In the West, Yaniki. So if you know geography, they have a map. And in the entire map, the West represents countries like Europe, America. So those are the big countries, right? Context, it's mainly Europe that we'll be learning about. Europe is where it's a continent in which there are many countries which kind of these things, right? So they start philosophy, and from philosophy, lots of other different disciplines, including history, started. So we learn about that, right, in this chapter. Ki how did people write history in the West? And when we say West, we're talking mainly about Europe. Okay. So is that clear to everyone? Can I get a yes in the chat box from about 5 people? Then I'll go ahead. A yes in the chat box, Ankit. The thumbs up won't do. Okay, thank you, Ankit, Sahil, Ritika, Prachi, Chand, and Khadija. Thank you. Okay, I'm good to go ahead. So that's kind of, I've set up the context. Now we'll go into the chapter, right? And as we go into the chapter, we'll start with the chapter outline, right? So this is the chapter outline. There are broadly 5 topics that we need to cover. The first one is the introduction of the chapter. Then we have tradition of historiography, modern historiography, scientific perspective in Europe and modern historiography, and lastly, notable scholars. You can see I've put 2 stars next to notable scholars. That's because that's the most important part of the chapter. Okay, 90% of the questions will come from that part of the chapter. So just bear that in mind. Yeah, so just to give you context, where did I get this from? Chapter outline. Got the chapter outline from this, right? So I'm sure you all know these things, but I'm going to say it anyway. So you can see this, and it's important to know this, right? It's important to, when you look at a chapter, to look at it this way. In this chapter, these are the topics, and in this topic, then and what does each topic represent? So this is where I've taken it from. And as you can see, so in the beginning, there's no title. This is the introduction part. Okay, till here. Then we have tradition of historiography. Then we have modern. Then we have development of scientific perspective in Europe and historiography. And then the most important part, which is notable scholars, right? In which we learn about 8 or 9 scholars. So that's where I've taken it from. Yeah, okay. So we'll go ahead. Today we're going to aim to finish this. We are aiming to finish this. We will finish this, which is just the introduction. It's important for you to pay attention to introduction because that should put your mind in a state to absorb the rest of the portion. Okay? So pay attention to this part, and you should think of it in this way now, from what we understand in the chapter as we go ahead. So okay. So now the first piece is within the introduction of the chapter is what is the objective or what is the aim of historical research, right? And if you read your textbook, there's a definition given in the first line of your textbook, right? I'll give you a minute to read it. Let me just present my screen so it's clearer for you all. Yeah. So this is the definition of historical research. I'll read it out. You can read it with me if you want. Historical research, writing, and studies are carried out with an objective of understanding the chronology of past events and their interconnections. This is a continuous process. So I've underlined the most important thing, right? So the objective is to understand the chronology of past events and their interconnections. And this is a continuous process. And in this, there are 4 words that are important. So when you remember the objective of historical research, these 4 words need to stay with you in a big way. So chronology, past events, interconnections, and continuous process, right? So what's happening here? 1 second. Okay. So first, what are past events? It's very simple, right? History is the study of the past. So therefore, the objective of history is to study past events. That's pretty simple. So for example, we'll take the death of Gandhiji, right? So just imagine for a second, we're trying to study the death of Gandhiji, right? So the next thing that becomes important is the chronology, right? So the order of the events. Chronology, आपने सुना होगा. I think Amit Shah ने बोला था उस पे बहुत like there was a lot of talk about that, right? He said, "Aap chronology samajhiye." So chronology means the order of events according to time, right? So taking the example of Gandhiji, if we are doing historical research and we are trying to understand the death of Gandhiji, then we'll ask ourselves maybe a simple question, right? Did Mahatma Gandhi die before or after we achieved independence? So that's a simple thing. You have to know that if you death of Gandhiji, right? So he died after we got independence, but you need to know that, right? So the chronology. So many events have happened in the past. So what happened when? When did Gandhi die? He died after independence. That's a simple little example. So that's the second thing, right? Chronology. Going ahead from there, interconnections. So connection to related events. Now, the death of Gandhiji, there were a lot of events that happened before and after, right? When we look at the chronology. So now we have to think of when was India's partition? When did Gandhiji die? Gandhiji's death related to India's partition. Why did Gandhiji die and how did he die? Right? And then when you investigate that, okay, sorry, Siddhartha says I should speak slower. Do that. So I'll repeat myself. We understood past events. So history is the study of the past. We are, for this example, taking the death of Gandhiji, right? History, when we study past events, we study the chronology of past events. So chronology means the order of events according to time. Yani ki, when did Gandhiji die? Did he die before independence or after independence? What are the other events that happened before and after Gandhiji's death? And when we have that in our mind, we'll have like a timeline, right? Keep what happened first, what happened second, what happened third, what happened fourth. For your information, he died after we achieved independence. Then the next thing is interconnection. So now we have in our mind कि इतने सारे past events हुए थे, right? So many past events happened. उनका order ये था, right? This was the order. One, that's the chronology. कि एक हुआ, फिर ये हुआ, फिर ये हुआ, फिर गांधी जी गुजर गए, then next, then next, then next. And then we have to look at how are these events connected, right? So what? How is that connected to what happened second? How is that connected to what happened third, right? So you should know that Gandhiji was assassinated, right? He was assassinated and the assassination had something to do with the party, right? The person who assassinated him, assassinated matlab murdered, but when you kill someone who is in a position of power, it is called assassination. So you should know that Gandhiji's death did have something to do with the partition. And then you need to know that Gandhiji didn't die of natural causes. He was assassinated by someone, right? And so now we're making interconnections कि क्या हुआ, किसने गांधीजी को मारा, क्यों उन्होंने मारा, क्योंकि वो partition के साथ related कुछ मतलब basically they were not happy with the decision that Gandhiji made related to the partition, right? And so that's, we are understanding history better. And then the of this is, I've done it again. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, and the last thing is that it's a continuous process, right? So today I may understand something about Gandhiji's death, but to read 5-6 more things that will tell me more details, right? So if you Google it, right, if you Google it and you go on Wikipedia and you see about Gandhiji's death, आपको ये दिखेगा कि lots of different people have said different things about Gandhiji's death, right? How the assassin came and shot Gandhiji, then what happened, right? uh, did everyone just stand still? Did people come and take the assassin away? What happened? So अलग अलग लोग अलग अलग बोलते हैं और उससे हमारा हिस्ट्री का समझ बदलता है, राइट? डिफरेंट पीपल टेल डिफरेंट स्टोरीज एंड बेस्ड ऑन द डिफरेंट स्टोरीज और बेस्ड ऑन द डिफरेंट अकाउंट्स of history, our understanding of history will keep on changing. So tomorrow, if someone who was right next to Gandhiji something and says, no, he didn't die this way, something else happened, then our understanding of history might change. Hence, historical research is a continuous process. Is this okay with everyone? If it is, please say yes in the chat box. 5 people, I'll wait. Thank you, Chand. If it's no, you can say no also. Then I'll repeat. Okay, I'm seeing all yeses. Thank you, all of you. Khadija, Prachi, Fiza, Aarti, Karthik, Chand. So I'll go ahead then. Everyone, if you don't understand something, feel free to stop me and ask, okay? Okay, so now the next thing you'll see in your textbook, and it's important to understand this, right? What our textbook is trying to tell us is, on the one hand, we have scientific research, and on the other hand, we have history and historical research, right? If you look at your society, if you look at your parents, my parents will all say, right? Our parents will say कि science है, science पढ़ोगे तो कुछ बनोगे, right? There's this idea in our minds that science is better, science is more reliable, science is more important. Why? Because science, when we think of science, we think of everything is in science, right? Everything is clear, everything is verifiable. We can check science, right? But when it comes to history, it doesn't hold that weight. That's what we feel. So the textbook is trying to compare scientific research and historical research and tell us that, देखो, scientific research has a particular methodology, and that makes science good, and that's how we do scientific research. But historical research also has a methodology, and that methodology is based on the way history is, right? And so it's important to know the difference between the two types of research, and it's important to know how both types of research are valuable and how both subjects are valuable. So that's the aim, right? To show you that they have different types of research and both are valuable. Okay. So quickly, we'll just understand this. So the first thing is the method, right, of the point of difference. So when we think of scientific research, we think of laboratory method, right? It's chemistry, biology, doesn't matter. You can go to a laboratory, you can do an experiment, and you can check, is this true or is this false, right? The outcome of scientific research is that you form a law. That law is true irrespective of time and place. So for example, if I say fire requires oxygen to burn, चाहे इंडिया में हो, अमेरिका में हो, माउंट एवरेस्ट पे हो, 1000 साल पहले हो या 1000 आगे हो, right? Whenever and wherever we check, fire will always require oxygen to burn. A simple experiment you can do for this is to take a candle, put it on a, light it, and put a glass on top of it, right? After 5 minutes, the candle will die. Why? Because all the oxygen in the air has been used for the fire to burn. So That's scientific research, right? It's verifiable, it's testable laboratory. It forms laws that are true irrespective of time and place, right? You can also think of things like photosynthesis, Newton motion, what else? Yeah, this might think works. So all of these things, you can always check it everywhere, right? Law of reflection, all of these things you can check anytime, any place, and they'll be true all the time. And so that's how scientific research works. But when we look at historical research, one important that for historical research, we don't conduct laboratory experiments. Why? Because history, though, it happened in the past. I can't go to the past and check, right? I can't go into the past and stand there where Gandhiji died and then write history. I have to rely on sources of history, something you learned in the 9th standard, right? Sources of history. So what different people said, what different people wrote, different artifacts, right? If someone did a painting of the scene, then I can refer to the painting. So what did the media say? All of these things I can refer to as sources of history, and I can conduct historical research. Now, based on that, I will come up with a theory कि मुझे ऐसा है, ये सब पढ़ के मुझे ऐसे लगता है, right? By reading the various sources of history, I feel like this is, I don't feel, I think, or I reason that this is what happened in the past, right? So sources of history to come up with theories, not laws. The important difference here is theory versus law, right? And this theory can change as new information is discovered. And so, for example, later on in your textbook, you learn about the daily schedule of Rani Lakshmi Bai, the Queen of Jhansi. If you're interested, you can go to the chapter of sports and history and read it, right? So, usme there's a man who's written about Jhansi ki Rani, if that's the word that rings in your head. So he writes ki Jhansi ki Rani used to wake up at this time, then she would do this, then she would do this, then she would ride an elephant, then she would do something. So he's given an account of her history based on his observation. Now, I could read someone else's account of her history, and they could have a different observation of how she's. And so that would change my understanding of history. So is that okay? Scientific research versus historical research, laboratory method versus sources of history, laws versus theories. Okay, and an example, you can take whatever examples you want. So if that's okay, then I'll move ahead. I put 5 yeses in the chat box. And if I'm talking too fast, Siddharth, you can tell me, okay? Or students can also tell. Okay, thank you, Chand, Prachi, Fiza, Karthik. Waiting for more. Is this clear? Scientific research versus historical research. Okay, great. Thank you. So fine, I'll go ahead. Are all of y'all, I mean, just stay alert, okay? It's a short class. We're covering a small amount of portions so that it stays in your head. So, yeah, sorry, I can't see the thumbs up. I'm going to need a yes in the chat box. Or anything. Even if you put thumbs up in the chat box, that's fine. But it should be in the chat box. I can't see all of your thumbnail images. Okay, thank you. All right, so far we've covered the objective of history, of historical research, and now we did the comparison between scientific research and historical research. And the next thing we're going to look at is this little diagram that you have in your textbook. So this basically is showing you ki historical research mein kya hota hai, right? So what are the activities? We'll call them activities. What are the activities involved in the historical research method? Ki agar aap historical research kar rahe ho, to kya padega, right? And over here you can see there are a total of 3 plus 3, 6 total things that we would have to do broadly when we're doing historical research. Now, these are written in a slightly complicated manner. So I'll explain them to you. And it's important for you to understand my explanation. So please pay attention carefully, right? So we can see 6 things in total here. But the first thing that you need to understand is whether it's tying your shoelaces or whether it's building a house, or whether it's historical research, there's always a process. There is a step one, then there is a step three. We can't do everything at once. So even though this diagram, even though this concept map just shows you 6 activities, and all 6 activities are pointing at the writing of the historical narrative, these 6 activities happen in an order, right? And at the end of the order, this happens, right? The writing of the historical narrative. So as per my understanding, this is the order. Okay, we always research, whether it's historical, scientific, any research, we start it with the formulation of relevant questions, right? We start it by making questions ki what do we want to know. So if you are conducting historical research, you will first think to yourself कि मैं क्या जानना चाहता हूँ या मैं क्या जानना चाहती हूँ, right? You will ask that question. It's a simple thing. It's a commonsensical thing. कि what do I want to know? And you'll write down, I want to know about this. I want to know about the death of Gandhiji, right? You'll write that down. So that's a relevant question. I want to know about the death of Gandhiji. Then after that, you'll think, what do I already know about the death of Gandhiji, right? So you'll think that, okay, I know that Gandhiji was assassinated. I know that it has something to do with the party speaking about sending money or releasing money to Pakistan. तो इतना आपको आता है. तो based on what you know, you will say कि ठीक है, I think कि जब मैं historical research तो मुझे ये result आएगा, right? So that thing where you're saying, I think this is what will be the result, that is called a hypothesis. So you will formulate a hypothesis, which is your expected result, right? And then you will begin to conduct historical research. And the way research works is you have your question that leads you to a hypothesis, that leads you to a guess. Then your entire research is to check whether that guess, whether that hypothesis is true or false. Okay. So that's the main way research works. Research always formulating relevant questions, and then we make a guess कि मुझे लगता है ऐसे होगा, and then we do research. हम अता पता करते हैं ताकि हम पता कर सके कि जो मेरा hypothesis है, my guess of what the truth is, correct or incorrect. Okay, so you must know that, you must keep that in mind, that it is a process. You must understand that the process starts with relevant questions, and the second step is hypothesis. Okay. Beyond that, there are a bunch of other steps. This don't necessarily have to happen in this particular order, but there is an order to them. So after I have a hypothesis, then I'll examine the various sources of history, right? I'll see कि किसने क्या कहा है, what are the different sources of history that tell me about Gandhiji's death. After I do that, I'll see ki what are the relevant references. Now, when we talk about references, we are saying ki what have people written about this, right? So just like me, 100 other people might have wanted to know about Gandhiji's death. तो शायद अंकित को भी पता करना था, सिद्धार्थ को भी पता करना था, Sandhya also wanted to know, Chanda also wanted to know, right? So if all of you have already wanted to know about his death, or aapne, like before me, you have done historical research, then as a smart person, what I will do is first I will read what you have written, right? So references are what other researchers have written. So first I'll see कि लोगों ने क्या लिखा है, right? And that helps me understand कि ठीक है, इन सब लोगों ने ये सब लिखा है, और जब इन्होंने ये लिखा है तो उन्होंने कौन से sources से information लिया है. Are you understanding? It's like when you do homework, some of you will cheat. Instead of doing the homework, you will look at someone else's homework and you will do it, right? That is not good for you. But in this case, when we talk about historical research, that is helpful, because you can see how other people have done it, and then you do it in your own way. That's the difference. When you all look at homework, you'll just copy it. But when we do historical research, we see how other people have done historical research, then use bits and bits. We use parts of everyone's research to understand how we should do our own research. Okay, so we examine relevant references. After we examine relevant references, we collect historical information. Then we start doing our own research, collect different pieces of information. And when we collect those different pieces of information, we start to understand when we need to highlight कि कब क्या हुआ था. So then we are writing our own story, right? So कब क्या हुआ, important थे, कौन सी चीज less important थे, right? So we collect the historical information, we highlight the processes that lead to historical transitions. So we will highlight that led to, if we're talking about Gandhi, we'll highlight the process that led to Gandhiji's assassination, right? So what was the major thing that happened that created these enemies within India for Gandhiji, right? And a comparative analysis key in the different stories I have read, what are the different stories saying, okay? So that's the fifth thing we'll do. And the last thing we'll do, and this is the most important thing, is we'll understand the references regarding time and space of the given historical event. So at the time of Gandhiji's death, क्या हो रहा था देश में, क्या हो रहा था दुनिया में, समझने की जरूरत है. Because based on what was happening in the country and based on what was happening in the world, different people would be thinking differently at that time. And based on how people are thinking at that time, right? So in today's day and age, we are all thinking in a certain way, right? And based on how we are thinking right now, we will write. तो आज के जमाने में हम environment के बारे में ध्यान देते हैं, right? We worry about women's rights, we worry about the environment. So that is the current thought process of people in the 20th century, right? But in the olden times, nobody thought about them. Women empowerment was very low in the olden times, so they didn't think about that time. So we need to understand that as well, right? So this is the process of the historical research method, and at the end of all of this, we will write our piece. I did my research and this is the product of my research. This is what I think happened for Gandhiji's death based on my readings based on my examination of sources of history, my reading of references of other people's writing, my understanding of the mindset, the conceptual framework of that day and time. So this is the process of the historical research method. It's very important for you to understand in this that it is a process. Even though this diagram just points everything in one direction, it is actually, it goes like this and it ends with writing of historical narrative. If that's clear to all of you, we can go ahead. I've just written down some explanation. When I share this PDF with you, you can read this, you'll understand it. If you all have understood, please give me a yes. If you have not understood, please give me a no in the chat box. Okay, thank you, Chand, Prachi, Sandhya, Karthik, Aarti, Khadija, Karina, Muskan. I'm seeing some new names. The more new names I see, the better it is, because that means more of y'all are paying attention. Great. Thank you, Usman, Fatima, Alfia, Aarti. Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead. Please don't hesitate to say no, okay, if you don't understand. What will happen is if you say you don't understand, I'll ask you what you don't understand. I expect you to unmute yourself, explain to me what you don't understand, and then I'll retry. So that's how that will go. So this is just for a reference for later. You don't need to read this. I don't need to explain it because my explanation was here. So now we'll go to the last part of what we need to do today, right? So if you go to a part of your textbook, the last part of the introduction, you'll see this word, right? Is useful in historical research, right? Yani ki, see, if I want to build a house, I need an architect, I need a carpenter, I need laborers, I need someone who's going to pay for the house, right? I need a bunch of different people. Similarly, when I need to do historical research, many different people who have different types of knowledge, who have different types of skills, right? So these are some of the skills, and what the word being used here is a discipline, and discipline kind of refers to occupational knowledge that one has, right? So so that is what the word refers to over here. So like even being a doctor, there's a discipline of that, right? So medicine of being a doctor. Similarly, architecture is a discipline. So there are disciplines there are jobs basically that are useful for historical research, and these are some of the jobs. So archival science. So archaeology means digging in things from olden times, I'm sure you've seen dinosaur bones. How do they find it? They dig in the ground and they find a big bone in the ground, and then they discover, oh, we had dinosaurs in the past, right? So that's archaeologists' work, right? They do the digging, understand how to preserve old things, and that's their work, right? They go and they find new things that are buried or that are hidden away in old places. So that's archaeology. Archival science is the storage of, if there are old letters, old writings, copper plates, so on and so forth. So how to store all of that information? That's archival science. Manuscriptology, manuscript yani ki any document, right? So people who can read documents, who understand how to read various types of documents. Epigraphy, the of inscriptions ki alag alag type ke writing hote hai. So epigraphy people, they understand the different types of writing, right? Of inscriptions. Inscriptions means in olden times, they would not write, they would patthar leke, they would make a mark on the rock, right? So that's where the word inscription comes from. Analysis of lettering style, right? Everyone has a different way of writing, every culture has a different way of writing. So the different lettering styles. Linguistics means languages. So someone who knows many different languages. So there are languages, जैसे कि the you'll understand is Sanskrit, Urdu. आजकल तो हम संस्कृत उर्दू में बात नहीं करते हैं, लिखते नहीं हैं. But these are old languages, right? When we think about it, they are old languages. There are languages that are even older than this. So linguists understand a variety of different languages across types of language and across age of languages. कि पुराने languages भी वो समझते हैं, right? Which are no longer in use. Then numismatics is the study of coins, and genealogy is the study of lineage, right? And this is fairly straightforward, but what I wanted you to do is, so you've seen a concept map already in our, so this is a concept map, right? Writing of historical narrative and all the activities involved in writing of a historical narrative. So I wanted you to make I want you to make a concept map of the very useful in historical research. Sorry, just scratch this word. You just need to draw it. Okay. And Google the meanings of the disciplines that you don't understand. A concept map broadly would look like this. So you would write over here disciplines useful in historical research, and then you'll write all the names of the disciplines here. Concept maps come in your board paper for a total 8 marks, if I'm not wrong, right? So 2 marks you have to do 2 for history, and 2 marks you have to do 2 for political science. So you should get into the practice of drawing concept maps. So it'll be good if you practice that over here, right? Instruction is clear and you understand what you need to do, and as to when you need to do it. After this class you need to do it. So if you understand that, just say yes and we'll move ahead. That's a little piece of homework for you. Okay. All right, thank you, Prachi, Karthik, Aarti, Bhavesh, that's Khadija. Great, Ankit, thank you. Awesome. Great. Okay, so I'll go ahead. So that's a little homework, right? Make the concept map of the disciplines useful in research. It can be like this. It can be a circle. The circle can be surrounded by 10 things. Idea is you should be thinking, when I do this in the board exam, how will I do it then? It should be neat, right? The neater it is, the better it is. So the neatest, aapke paper pe already lines hai. So you just have to kind of trace out the lines, write it nicely, and it's done. So that's that. And now we'll recap, right? So I want you to take 2 minutes. You can flip through your textbook, you can think about it, and you should be able to answer these 4 questions based on what we've learned so far, right? So I'm just going to keep quiet for about 8:36. So till 8:39. So we'll go ahead and we'll see just where the answers to these questions are, right? So these are actually broadly 4 points that we've covered in the chapter. I hope all of you already got it, right? So the first question is, what is the objective research. So it's this, right? Understanding the chronology of past events, their interconnection, and this is a continuous process. So that's the answer to the first question, right? This is the objective of historical research. This is just an explanation for you. This is all you need to remember. Okay. Is my cursor visible? Can you see my arrow? Anyone? Okay. Thanks, Siddharth. Okay. This is the answer to the first question. The second question's answer is this, right? Differences between scientific and historical research. Answer is this, the historical research method, which I've put in simple words for you to understand here. Again, 6 steps, right? And the last answer is this, right? The disciplines useful in historical research. Just when you think, at least 4 should come to your mind, right? Because a concept, so you need 4 points in that. So 4 should come in your mind at any given point of time. So these are the disciplines useful in historical research. And that's basically it. That's our recap. Now, I will see you next on Friday, right? So quite a gap between Monday and Friday. So this is what we've completed today, right? We've completed the introduction. In the introduction, there were 4 subparts. What are the 4 subparts? These 4 questions are the 4 subparts, right? Is in this topic, basically 4 things you need to know, which we've covered today. Similarly, per topic, I'll show you how many things there are to know. And that's the way you study, right? Per topic, you need to understand how many things are there inside that I need to understand. It's like opening a drawer inside a drawer inside a drawer, right? Iske andar ye hai, iske andar ye hai. So it's like that. In the introduction, we've learned broadly 4 points. And what I want you all to do is basically you need to read tradition of historiography, modern historiography, and development of scientific perspective in Europe, as well as, right, for Friday. So this is basically your homework, right? First, you'll read the introduction from the textbook. You'll read the tradition of historiography, and specifically the tradition of historiography. Isme 3 paragraph hai. There are 3 paragraphs in this topic. I want you to try and identify the main idea. I know I've not taught you how to do this, but just try, right? Basically, you need to identify like 1 important sentence or 2 important sentences in each paragraph to understand what the paragraph is about. So in tradition of historiography, identify the main idea of each paragraph. There are a total of 3 paragraphs. And then beyond that, read 1 and 1.3 as well. Before I go, I'll just show you where this homework is so that you can, how do I escape this? Okay, so I'll just show you where all of it. So this is your homework. First, just process that. If you need to write it down, take a minute. You need to read the introduction, which is what we did today. This you need to do. Write it down. Take a minute. 8:43, I'll start talking again. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. You can't see, sorry. Can you see now? I just have a minute.
सर फर्स्ट वाला
आपको यही लिखना है और वो कॉन्सेप्ट मैप. Now I'll just show you what you need to do, right? So this is basically what we've covered today. I'll show you in terms of the textbook, because you only have the textbook for reference currently. Today we just covered this small part from here to here, covered this diagram, and we covered this. What I'm asking you to do is to read this, the tradition of historiography. Okay, that's this much. You can see 3 paragraphs, 1, 2, 3. I want the main idea in each paragraph, okay, which is just identify a sentence or write your own sentence that captures what this paragraph is trying to tell me. And then I want you to read this modern historiography. This is just 4 points. Okay, 5 points if you include this. And the last thing I want you to read is this. It's very little. Okay. So I'd like you to read this and come for our class. And if you'd like to read this, you can. If you don't want to, it's fine that you don't. But definitely read 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. We'll cover that on Friday, and then we will dive into the notable scholars, which is the most interesting, most fun, and most important part of the chapter.
Today, we are going to start a new chapter of Mathematics 2. This is chapter number 2 of your textbook, which is called Pythagoras Theorem. Pythagoras theorem is not new to you. Pythagoras theorem is not new to me. Pythagoras theorem is not new for us. We have studied it starting from class 7 or even before that. What we will do today is, like we do when we start any new chapter, we will understand what is it that we need to know. What is it that we have already studied in previous classes, also in this year, related to this. We need to understand what all we need to know for us to understand this chapter this year in a good way. So there will be 2 parts to the session today. First, we will look at what we should have studied, because we know many of us have not paid attention in previous years. So things were there in the textbook. In some cases it was taught, in some cases it was not taught. In case of some students you studied, and in case of many students you did not study. And this will be the last time in school, because this is the last year in school. This is the last time for us to catch up what we have missed in previous years. Once we do that, we will also see very, very briefly what we are going to study new in this year, in this chapter. I have designed these slides in a way that this is a complete summary of what you need to know about Pythagoras theorem, class 7, from class 7 to class 10. This will be, if you have to revise any day later about Pythagoras theorem, if you refer to this presentation, it should be complete. Need 10 confirmations that yes, we understand what we are going to do. Let us begin. You can 3, 4, 5. Six, 7. Okay, I think I'll have to be happy with 7 only. No, got 10. Thank you very much. So first, what we have or we should have studied already. And the story begins from triangles. The story begins from triangles. What we are going to do now is, I'm going to draw something on the screen and I'm going to ask you certain questions. You will try to answer either by coming out of mute or typing it in the chat box. Here I have drawn a triangle, very, very simple triangle. I want you to tell me what are the names of the 3 vertices of this triangle. Quickly, fast. You can speak if you know the answer. You can type if you know the answer. Very fast, Khadija. The vertices are the points A, B, and C. Thank you for the answers in the chat box. So these are the points. Second question. What are the 3 sides of this triangle? Once again, you can answer by speaking, you can answer by typing. Very fast, Khadija and Prachi. The sides are AB, BC, and CA. So in the diagram, the sides are AB, BC, CA. Sides are line segments. Vertices are points. Sides are line segments joining those points. And because we have three vertices, they are non-collinear. They are not on one straight line. So we end up with three line segments, and we end up with a closed figure of three sides. It's a polygon of three sides. So this is called a triangle. Where are the angles? The question should be. Next question. Name the three angles of this triangle.
BC.
Wrong answer. Name the three angles. Prachi, not that way. Okay, I may accept. If you say angle A, angle B, angle C, this is one way to answer. You can also say angle BAC, angle ABC, angle BC. Either way is fine. So angles are these. So if you look at the triangle, we start with three random non-collinear points. When we join the 3 points by line segments, we get three sides and we get a complete triangle. And because of these three lines meeting each other at three different points, which are called the vertices, we also have three angles. Now, the bonus question. What is the sum of the three angles of any triangle?
180.
Very good. Correct answer. 180 degrees. This is the basic information about what a triangle is. Because you have answered correctly and you have answered fast. I'm sure that you are understanding and you have understood. We will move to the next basic concept. And it is a specific type of triangle, which is called a right-angled triangle. Right-angled triangle. An example of a right-angled triangle is on your screen. Once again, I would like you to tell me what are the names of the three vertices of this triangle. Very good.
PRQ.
Okay, P, Q, R or PRQ, any way you want to say it. Good. Now, where is that right angle? Which angle is the right angle?
RQP.
Or PQR, correct. RQP or PQR, because it is 90 degrees. And how do we know it is 90 degrees? You see, there is a rectangle shape made here. So this is the 90 degree angle. 90 degree angle is also called as a right angle. Because of that, this triangle is called a right angled triangle. And there is something special about one of the sides of the right angle triangle. The speciality is the longest side of the right angle triangle is called the hypotenuse. It is called the hypotenuse. Now let us see. If you know in this triangle, which side is the hypotenuse?
PR.
It is PR, correct. It is PR. Now, there is another way to find out which is the hypotenuse. Instead of measuring which side is the longest, we can also see which side is opposite to the right angle. The side that is opposite to the right angle here is PR. You can also say RP, no problem. So this gives us a right angled triangle. And we also know we can write the name of it, triangle, as with a triangle symbol and the names of the three vertices side by side without any separation, without any space. You have answered these questions also. and you have answered these questions correctly and fast. So I'm believing that you have understood and there are no doubts here. The entire chapter, or the focus of the chapter, this chapter is about right angled triangle. Moving to the next concept. Pythagoras theorem. Then you may ask, sir, aapne to kaha that we are going to study it. Then why are you saying that we have studied it? But we have studied it already. This year we will study it in a different way. We have already studied that in a right angled triangle, the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the remaining two sides. Now, if you look at the same triangle from the previous screen, right angle triangle PQR, you have already identified that the right angle is at Q. We have identified that if this is the case, then the hypotenuse is PR. Then if we translate Pythagoras theorem from English to mathematics, it becomes PR square equals to PQ square plus QR square, where PR is the length of the hypotenuse, PQ is the length of the side PQ, and QR is the length of the side QR. Why have we written this? Because this is the notation in geography, not in geography, in geometry, very sorry. In geometry, if we have 2 points, any 2 points, suppose they are called X and Y, the distance between X and Y is represented by the line segment XY. So when we say XY, it represents the line segment XY joining points X and Y. It also represents the length of the line segment joining X and Y. It represents the distance between the points X and Y. Using that concept, we can write PR square equals to PQ square plus QR square. Need confirmation that this basic thing is clear.
Yes,
sir.
Good, thank you. Now, suppose the length of the hypotenuse is Q, the length of PQ is R, and the length of QR is P. And remember here, I'm not saying PQR randomly. I'm using small q as the length of the side which is opposite to the angle capital Q. I'm using small r as the length of the side opposite to the angle which is named capital R. And I'm saying the length of the side QR, which is opposite to angle Q, is small p. If that is the case, the same statement, the same equation can be written as Q square plus P square plus R square. The same theorem can be written in different ways. Let us understand that they mean the same thing. We are referring to the lengths of the three sides of a right angled triangle. Waiting for calculations. We need to get this language clear for us to understand the chapter in a much better way. What is a triangle? What are vertices? What are sides? What are angles? What is a right angle triangle? What is Pythagoras theorem? What is the hypotenuse? And how its square is equal to the sum of the square of the other two sides. Very good. Let us move to another concept. This is something you studied in class 7, or you should have studied in class 7. This is one way of proving what the Pythagoras theorem says. And this is a empirical proof. Empirical. We studied last year, chapter 1 in geometry, based on facts, based on measurements. So what we can do is we can draw right angle triangles. In this case, the right angle triangle is triangle ABC. I hope you can see. The hypotenuse is the side AC because the right angle is angle B. Right? Now, if we measure the length of AC, if we measure the length of AB, if we measure the length of BC, take the squares, then we will see that AC square is equal to AB square plus BC square. What is interesting to note here is, what is the meaning of AC square? Arithmetically speaking, AC square means AC into AC. Geometrically speaking, AC square is the area of the square formed of side of length AC, and that is this square. Think what I just said. So this side here is AC, this side here is AC, and we know area of the square is side into side, which is AC into AC, which is AC square. Similarly, the square that we have on the left hand side will become AB square. It is the area of the square is AB square. Similarly, the square that we have at the bottom, the area of that square is BC square. Another way to look at it is, if we divide any of these squares of unit lengths, then take the example of the square on the left hand side. So it will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 3 and 3. 3 3s are 9. In case of BC, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. So 4 into 4, 16. In case of AC, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 5 into 5 equals to 25. Right? So it makes it much easier for us to visualize what Pythagoras theorem means, what square of a number means. Remember this, arithmetically, if we are taking x and squaring it, it just means x multiplied by x. Geometrically, x square means a square of side x. It means all the sides are of length x and its area will be x square. This is the meaning. If we go to the next concept, we also studied another proof in class 7 of same Pythagoras theorem. Here we said, let us imagine a triangle. Let us imagine a triangle, right angle triangle of sides A, B, and C, such that A is the hypotenuse. And then we said, let us take 8 of these or 4 of this. And arrange these 4 in the way that you see on the left in figure 1. Triangle 1, triangle 2, triangle 3, triangle 4. So very clearly, what we have in the middle is a square. Why is it a square? Because it is a polygon. It has 4 sides. All the sides are of equal length, A. And we can actually measure that all these angles are 90 degrees.
2 2s are 4.
90 degrees. 90 degrees. And we know from basic geometry that this area of this white square will be side into side. Side into side means A into A, which becomes A square. Which becomes A square. Now comes the most interesting part is we will do two movements. We will move two triangles. Movement number one. We will move triangle 1 like this. So now this is triangle 1, this is triangle 2. And we will move triangle 3 from here to here. Now we see that instead of one white square, we have two white squares. One is smaller, one is bigger. But very clearly, because we know what the area of a square is, we can say that the area of the white square on the top left will be B square because all the sides are of the length B. And the area of the square on the bottom right will be C square because all the sides of this square is C, is of length C. But remember, in both cases, the empty space has to be same because the occupied space is same. The total space remains same. So the empty space from figure 1, the white square, is A square. The empty space from the right hand side is B square plus C square. And this is Pythagoras theorem. Hypotenuse square is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. Proof. I'm sharing with you 3 videos which show 3 different ways of proving the same Pythagoras theorem. Do you need to know everything? No. Are they same? Yes. A little bit different. They use the same concept. If you are able to understand, excellent. If you are not able to understand, maybe sometime soon you will understand. You will not play the video now. You will watch the video after the class. Moving on to the next thing. If we have understood what Pythagoras theorem is, we should be able to find measurement of one side of a right angle triangle if the other two sides are given. If the other two sides are given. Let us try to solve these questions. One, I will solve with you. You will help me solve. The other two, you will solve on your own and tell me the answer. The 3 questions are on your screen. If you look at question number 1, we have a right angle triangle LMN, where angle M is the 90-degree angle. So clearly, side LN is the hypotenuse. The question is find X. Now using Pythagoras theorem, we can say, now you can help me complete it. X square equals to, what should I write?
N.
Yes, Chanda, you can speak. Don't need to raise your hand.
LM square.
Okay. Ln square plus M
MN
square. Thank you. So Ln square, the side is given as 7. I can write 7. Mn is 24. 24 square. So this is 7 square is 49. Remember, sir asked you to practice squares till 30. So if you have practiced, you will be able to give me the square of 24 quickly. Don't use calculators. Yes, Chanda?
576.
Correct. 576. Now, if we add 49 and 76, I think we will get 625. Now, if we want to get X, we will have to take square root of 625. Again, if you have practiced your squares, you would know 625 is the square of 25. So this is 25.
25.
It is 25. If there is any doubt regarding this, ask. If there is no doubt, then solve question number 2 and question number 3 in your notebook and send me the answer. Send the answer to everyone in the chat. Let us look at question number 3 first. Okay. The only reason is the numbers are small here, so maybe we will be able to answer this faster. Now, first thing to notice here is the 90-degree angle here is angle T. 90-degree angle is angle T. We need to know, because we need to know which is the hypotenuse. So clearly the side EF is hypotenuse. So we can write using Pythagoras theorem 17 square equals to x square plus 8 square. Or 17 square is 289. Can someone please confirm? Is it 289 or is it 389? Is it something else? Waiting for your answers. 289 equals to x square plus 64. Now x square becomes equal to 289 minus 64, which is 225. Then when we take square root, if you remember, 15 square is 225. So this comes to 15. Life will be very easy if you follow instruction, follow what your teachers ask you to do, and practice what we have advised you to. 17 square is 289. If you remember, it is fast. If you don't remember, it will become slow. 15 square is 225. If you remember, it will be fast. If you don't remember, it will be slow. Thank you, Tushar, for sending the answer to the second question. Complete answer Tushar has sent. Here, angle Q is the 90-degree angle. So side PR is the hypotenuse. So using Pythagoras theorem, we can write 41 square equals to x square plus 9 square. 41 square, Tushar and Aman also calculated, is 1681. X square plus 9 square is 81. So x square comes to 1681 minus 81, which is 1600. Therefore, our x will be square root of 1600. 16 comes from 4 into 4. There are 2 zeros, so we will use one more zero to get 40. This is how we can find the length of the side that we don't know if the length of two other sides of a right angle triangle are given. The longest side, which is opposite to the 90-degree angle, is the hypotenuse, and always, always, always in a right angle triangle, hypotenuse square will be equal to side 1 square plus side 2 square. There is something more that we studied about right angle triangles and Pythagoras theorem, but we studied not in class 7, but yes, in class 7 also, and last year also. And that is called Pythagorean triplets. Triplet is a set of 3 numbers, group of 3 numbers. Not just any number, group of 3 natural numbers, it says. Such that the square of the largest number is equal to the sum of the squares of the remaining 2 numbers. Then this set of 3 numbers is called Pythagorean triplet. Let us understand where it is coming from. They are not random numbers, right? They are actually lengths of the sides of right angled triangles. For example, you would remember that if you have a right angled triangle A, B, and C with angle B as 90 degrees, such that AB equals to 3 cm, BC equals to 4 cm, you have calculated it tens or hundreds of times that the hypotenuse AC here will be 3 square plus 4 square cos square root, which is equal to 25 cos square root, which is equal to 5. Now, this set of three numbers, 3, 4, and 5, it is called a Pythagorean triplet. It is called a Pythagorean triplet because it satisfies the Pythagoras theorem. These numbers are nothing but lengths of sides of right angle triangles. ये बस नाम है, नाम जानना है. It will really help us if we remember some very basic Pythagorean triplets. I've listed all of them here. First one is 3, 4, 5. Second one is 5, 12, 13. Third one is 8, 15, 17. Fourth one is 11, 60, 61. And the last one is 24, 25, 27. These are very basic, very common Pythagorean triplets. Now, something that we looked at very briefly last year, it is more of it is given this year, and this is something good to know. This is something good to know. No one is going to ask you a question related to this exactly from this in the board exam, but questions may be there in other exams about what we are going to study here. How can we generate, how can we make more Pythagorean triplets? There are two basic ways. First one, I talked to you last year that start from the base triplet. For example, from the previous slide, the first one was 3, 4, 5. Now, if you want to get another triplet, all you have to do is multiply all these numbers by the same number. Suppose you multiply it with 2. Then you get 2 into 3, 6, 2 into 4, 8, 2 into 5, 10. This is also a Pythagorean triplet. If you multiply the base triplet by, say, 3, then 3 into 3, 9, 3 4s are 12, 3 5s are 15. This is also a Pythagorean triplet. If you multiply it with any other number, suppose you multiply it with 5. 5 3s are 15, 5 4s are 20, 5 5s are 25. This is also a Pythagorean triplet. It's good to know because if we know this, then we can do some calculations in our heads. If we see a triangle with sides 9 and 12 and 90-degree angle, we can very quickly know that the hypotenuse will be 15. If we have a right angle triangle with sides 15 and 25, then the other side, in our head, we will quickly know that the other side, the remaining side will be 20. This is the use. The other method that is given in your textbook on the second page of the chapter, top of the second page of the chapter, is this. It says, suppose A and B are two natural numbers such that A is greater than B. A is greater than B. Then we can find Pythagorean triplets using A and B as one, the first number will be A square plus B square. The second one will be A square minus B square. And the third one will be 2 into A into B. 2 into A into B. Let us see that. Let us understand this with an example which is in your textbook. The example is, suppose we have A equals to 5 and B equals to 3. If this is the case, then A square plus B square will be equal to 5 square plus 3 square equals to 25 plus 9 equals to 34. A square minus B square equals to 5 square minus 3 square equals to 25 minus 9 equals to 16. Finally, 2AB will be equal to 2 into 5 into 3. 2 into 5 is 10. 10 into 3 is 30. So what this rule tells us is 16, 30, 34 is also a Pythagorean triplet. 16, 30, 34 is also a Pythagorean triplet, in which 34 will be the side, the longest side. It will be the length of the hypotenuse. Remember, when we are writing the triplet, it is not necessary to write in any particular order. We can write 30, 16, 34. We can also write 34, 16, 30. Any order is fine. Generally, we write it in the increasing order. Only generally, it's not a rule. Now, to something that we studied last year. We studied this thing at two different places. One, when we were studying triangles, Pythagoras theorem, and we also studied the same thing when we were studying trigonometry. We looked at two special kinds of right angle triangle. One was 30, 60, 90 degree triangle. All it means is it is a right angle triangle in which the angles are of the measure 30 degree, 60 degree, and 90 degrees. And we understood that if this is the case, then we can find out the length of the sides if we know the length of the hypotenuse. We have understood, we have studied last year, and we also proved how we got there. This year we don't need the proof. We have already studied it last year. We studied that if the hypotenuse is h, why have I written h in besides ln? Because angle M is 90 degree. So the longest side will be opposite to that. So if this is h, we have studied that the side opposite to the 30 degree angle will be 1 by 2 multiplied by h. And the side opposite to the 60 degree angle will be root 3 by 2 multiplied by h. Suppose our h equals to 10 or 10 cm. So very clearly, this is the length of Ln. If you have to find the length of Mn, we can write it will be 1 by 2 into 10, which will be 5. Similarly, if we have to find the length of Lm, it will be equal to root 3 by 2 multiplied by h, which is 10, which is 5 root 3. Please notice that it is not that we can find the sides from the hypotenuse. We can also find the hypotenuse from the sides. In general, we can summarize this as the side opposite to 30 degree angle will be equal to 1 by 2 into hypotenuse, and the side which is opposite to 60 degree angle will be equal to root 3 by 2 h. You see, these are linear equations in two variables. So if one variable is given, if the value of one variable is given, we can easily find the second variable, value of the second variable. If h is given, we can find s30. If s30 is given, we can find h. If h is given, we can find s60. And if s60 is given, we can find h. So this is what needs to be noted down for this triangle 30, 60, 90 right angle triangle. The other type of special right angle triangle that we have studied, and again we studied it two places in geometry last year. One, when we were studying triangles, right angle triangles, Pythagoras theorem, and when we studied trigonometry, and that triangle is 45, 45, 90-degree triangle. Clearly, this is an isosceles right angle triangle. These two sides are same. In this diagram, angle X is clearly the 90-degree angle. So the side opposite to it will be the longest side. This is the hypotenuse. What we studied and we proved is, in such a triangle, we can find the measures of the remaining sides because we know it will be 1 by root 2 multiplied by h and 1 by root 2 multiplied by h. Once again, if you write it in the general form, if we have a isosceles right angle triangle, if we have a 45, 45, 90-degree right triangle, then the side opposite to the 45-degree angle will be equal to 1 by root 2 multiplied by h. The other side is also same, so we can just write the whole thing in one line. For example, if h equals to 10, you tell me what will be xy and how much will be xz. Calculate in your notebooks and type the answer in the chat box. The formula is right in front of you. You just had to apply the formula. First of all, xy and xz will be of the same length. And the formula very clearly says it will be 1 by root 2 multiplied by 10. So come se come, you could have told me that the answer is 10 by root 2 and it is correct. Now to make it better, we would like to not have a surd in the denominator. 10 by root 2 is correct. If you write 10 by root 2, this answer is correct. But is it the beautiful answer? No, it is not. Because in the denominator, we have an irrational number. We have a surd. So to remove that surd, what we can do is, we multiply root 2 both to the numerator and to the denominator. So now the numerator becomes 10 root 2. And the denominator becomes root 2 into root 2, which is 2. Finally, we know 10 by 2 is 5. So the answer becomes 5 root 2. Akhilesh and Rajesh, your answer was correct. The answer becomes 5 root 2. So next is, what is that we are going to study this year? What is it? What is the new thing that we are going to study this year? Very, very simple. First, we will study another proof of Pythagoras theorem, this time using similarity, which we studied in chapter 1 this year, similar triangles. When we were studying that chapter, I told you about certain diagrams. I told you, please remember these diagrams very clearly, understand them very thoroughly, because they will be used in the entire textbook. And this is one of the diagrams in which we have triangle ABC, which is a right angle triangle. We have we have an altitude BD, which is perpendicular to AC. So now we have 3 right angle triangles. If you see clearly, triangle ABC, triangle ADB, and triangle BDC. And in chapter 1, we have already proved that these 3 triangles are similar to each other. In the previous chapter, we have solved a question in which we have proved that if this is the situation, then BD square equals to AD into CD. We will study that in the form of a theorem in this chapter. And using these two properties, we will prove the Pythagoras theorem, which is AC square equals to AB square plus BC square. The next thing that we will study is relationship between sides of an acute angle triangle. Relationship between sides of an acute angle triangle, and we will find this relationship using Pythagoras theorem. So this is the diagram that we will understand. I'm not explaining it to you now. I'm not explaining this to you now. I'm just, as I told you, I've designed this presentation as a summary for the entire chapter, entire Pythagoras theorem that we need to understand. So here we will find out how AB square equals to BC square plus AC square minus 2BC into DC, where triangle ABC is an acute angle triangle. You would be guessing that there must be something about the obtuse angle triangle also. Yes. We will understand how the sides of an obtuse angle triangle are related to each other, and we will understand this with the help of Pythagoras theorem. We will find out that AB square equals to BC square plus AC square plus 2BC into CD. This is the only difference. In case of acute angle triangle, it was minus A. We will study one more thing this year, and it is with respect to the median and sides of a triangle. Median is the line segment that joins one vertex to the midpoint of the opposite side. So if ABC is the triangle such that M is the midpoint of BC, then AM is the median. That means BM equals to CM. Then using Pythagoras theorem, we will prove that AB square plus AC square equals to 2AM square plus 2BM square. And this is a very interesting name, this theorem is called Apollonius theorem. These are the things that we will study this year in this chapter. You will complete the notes. The notes will be with respect to what we should have studied already, what we have studied already. You would watch the 3 videos, the links to which are already included in the presentation. And you will read pages 30 to 32 of the textbook, mathematics textbook, so that we are ready to study more